Elevate your walls from ordinary to extraordinary with 25 budget-friendly DIY wall art dupes, impressive thrift flips, and inspiring trash to treasure transformations. Wall art is a quick, easy way to spruce up any room. However, it can come with a hefty price tag. Take, for instance, this set of 4 European intaglios in a shadow box frame. This wall art is from Etsy. This set of 4 comes in at a whopping price of $680. I know that we can do much better than that. So the first thing that we need to do is find ourselves a shadow box frame. So I headed over to Michael's because recently they've been having some great sales on frames, and luckily for me, I found these frames. They are black 16 by 20 canvas frames, which is similar to a shadow box frame. And the price was right at only $10 a piece, so I picked up 2 of these. Now, one piece of advice I can give you is do not let the color dissuade you from buying something that you love. Color can always be changed. So yes, these frames are black, but that's not a big deal because we can paint them gold. So I took my frames outside and I got some gold Rustoleum spray paint, and I sprayed the frames in this gold spray paint. I made sure that the entire frame, including the inside of the frame, was sprayed in the spray paint, and then I let it dry for 1 hour. The next item that we need is some canvas to go inside of our frame. I went to Hobby Lobby and I checked out their canvas section, and they had these 16 by 20 canvases, and they were on clearance for only $6.99, and it was a package of 2. So that was a great find. The intaglios on our inspiration piece looked like they were marble or clay to me. So what I did while I was at Hobby Lobby, I figured I'd head over to the rock and the mosaic section and see what they had there. They had a package of these white flat rocks. I loved that they're natural and misshapen, and I thought they would be a great backdrop for the design that we're going to put on top. And this bag was on sale 40% off. So far, so good. Now, our inspiration piece intaglios look like they had some farmers on it and some buildings, and while those are nice, I want something that is meaningful to me and my family, especially if I'm going to hang it up on the wall. Keys are an important part of our family and also in our religion, so I thought keys would be fantastic to put on our rocks. I went to the scrapbook section at Hobby Lobby and I found this package of 7 keys. Again, it was 40% off. The final piece that we need for our frames is a mat to go around it. As you know, mats can get extremely expensive, but while I was at Hobby Lobby, I decided to wander a little bit down the clearance section, and I found these huge, oversized mats. They had a white one, which is perfect for what we need, and the price was right at $3.24. Everything we needed at Hobby Lobby was either on sale or on clearance, so we hit the bargain jackpot. We are off to a great start. So now that we have our pieces, let's get started on our wall art. We are going to begin with the keys. The keys are great, but they are the wrong color, and so I'm going to take them outside and spray them in some white Rustoleum spray paint. I made sure that these keys were saturated in this white spray paint, and then I waited for an hour to let them dry. I came back and I flipped the keys over and I sprayed them again on the opposite side. Once they were completely coated in the spray paint, I let them dry for another hour. While our paint is drying, I thought this is a perfect time to get started on our mat. So I took my canvas and I put it over the top of the mat. I took a pencil and I traced out the size I needed. Then I got a rotary cutter and I cut out the rectangle. For the inside, I got a ruler and I measured out the size that I needed to cut out the center. This time I'm using an X-Acto knife. I love using an X-Acto knife because it gets those lines crisp and sharp, especially in the corners. So now I have my mats. I cut 2 of them out and those are ready to go. Now it's time to assemble, so I took my mats and I added some hot glue to the canvas, and then I pressed my mat over the top because we do not want those mats sliding around. Next, I laid out my flat rocks to determine which ones I wanted to use, And then I got my keys and I added some hot glue to the back of the keys and then pressed them into the center of our flat rocks. I did this with all 6 of the keys. Now I'm going to take my rocks and I'm going to place them on my canvas. I got a ruler out to make sure that they were evenly spaced. And then I got some hot glue and I put the hot glue on the back of the rocks and pressed them firmly to the canvas. Again, I did this with all 6 of my rocks. Now all we need to do is take our canvas and put them back into the frame. I put in the plexiglass first and then put our canvas inside and then added the backing to the back. I have been wanting some artwork in this dining room right over here on the wall. I have some beautiful box moldings, but they were empty, and so I wanted to fill them with something that was classic and neutral. And these intaglio shadow box pieces of wall art are perfect for this space. I hung them up, and now we have a beautiful piece in here. Not only is it gorgeous, but it is meaningful. I did let each of the family members pick out the key that represented them. So it does have a purpose, not only just being beautiful, but it does have some meaning behind it. Our inspiration wall art from Etsy was $680, and that was for a set of 4. We did 2, so let's break that down into an individual piece. So each piece of framed wall art was $170. So it would have been $340 for me to purchase these from Etsy. I ended up spending $39.31. So we ended up saving over $300 from our inspiration piece. And as a bonus, mine are larger. So I got the exact size that I wanted. And now I have some classy, elegant wall art to adorn the walls in my dining room. Our first project is going to start off with 8 5x7 canvases. I purchased these small canvases at Ross. They came in a package of 8 and they were only $3.99. They were on clearance. I love a good bargain. Now, if you've been with me for a while, you know that I love to hydro dip. Just a couple of weeks ago, we hydro dipped this urn right here. And so I thought, let's see if we can hydro dip some art. So that is exactly what we're gonna do with our canvases. So I got a small garbage can and I lined it with a garbage sack, and then I filled it to the top with some water. Then I took 3 spray paints. I'm using a gold, a silver, and a black spray paint. I'm going for a marbleized design, and so these colors are gonna give me that look. So I took my spray paint and I began to spray it into the water. I did silver and gold, and the silver and the gold, and then a little bit of black in the water. I did more silver and gold than I did black because black is very overpowering, so I didn't want to use very much of that. Once I had the bullseye formed in the water, I took my canvases and I dipped them into the paint. You can dip 2 to 3 of these canvases into the paint that you sprayed in one setting before you need to respray your paint, which is what I did after I had dipped a couple of canvases in. I resprayed the paint into the water. I did the exact same process, just alternating the colors until I got the desired marble look that I wanted, and then I took my canvases and I dipped them into the water. I use plastic gloves because I don't want the paint to get on my hands while I'm dipping the canvases. Once I had dipped all of my canvases in the paint, I let them dry for 2 to 3 hours. The previous time when I hydro dipped my urn, I had a lot of inquiries as to what I did with the water after I was done hydro dipping. Well, let me show you what I do. Is you can look close, you can see that the paint will adhere to the garbage sack. That's why I use a garbage sack. If you don't use a garbage sack, it will stick to the side of whatever container you decide to use. The water, as you can see, is clear because the paint will gravitate and stick to whatever is closest to it. And now I can just take my bucket of water and dump it out in the grass. As you can see, after I've dumped my water, the paint is still on that plastic bag, so I didn't get any of the paint in the grass. Now I can remove the garbage sack and throw it away. Super simple, zero mess. Okay, so now that our canvases are dry, we are going to frame them. We're gonna use some frames that I purchased at my thrift store. Surprise, surprise. I love my thrift store. These frames are so pretty. I love the gold detail on them. The art inside of these frames is not my style. Don't get me wrong, I like an astrological chart as much as the next person, but I don't want to display it in my house. So I'm going to remove this art and we are going to put in our canvases. And the best part is that these were only $5.99 a piece. I need to create a backing that's going to go behind our canvases. And what I'm going to use is a gift bag. I purchased this gift bag at Ross a while ago. This is going to be perfect behind our art. It's the right color, it's gold, and it's black. It's going to make our art pop. You can use unique items like this to use as backing. I've done wrapping paper in the past. You can use contact paper, you can use scrapbook paper, all kinds of things to give your art just a little extra pop. I simply took the bag apart, I separated the edges from each other, and then I laid it flat. Next, I took the back of the frame and traced around it so I had the perfect size template, and then I cut it out with scissors. I hot glued the gift bag rectangle directly onto the back of the frame. I hot glued around the edges. The reason why I am doing this is because sometimes you can hot glue things and put paper over the top and it gets wavy. I don't want it to be wavy in the middle. The edges are going to be covered up with our mat. I'm going to do the same thing with the mat. I'm going to hot glue that directly over the top of our black gift bag. And now it's time to add our marbleized canvases. I got a ruler and I put it at the top so I could make sure that all of my mini canvases were equidistant from each other, and then I simply hot glued them into place. I'm doing 4 small canvases per frame. I want this to be more of a collection instead of individual pieces. And then I simply repeated this process with my other frame. I did the exact same thing, and now I have my art that is ready to be put back into our frames. Now these frames are so sturdy, I actually had to screw them back together, so I know they're not gonna come apart. And now everything is complete. We have our wall art. I cannot even tell you how beautiful this is. This looks like you could buy it at a store for $50, $60, $70, $100, but we made this so affordably. We got some thrifted frames, we used some canvases that were on clearance, and a little bit of spray paint. And each piece is so unique and individual, but as a whole, this collection looks very cohesive. This was so simple, anybody could do this, and you could definitely customize this to fit into your own design, color scheme, or style. You could pick whichever spray paints you wanted to use and customize it to make it into an art piece that you will treasure. Last week, I created a fireplace mantle for my bedroom. It was such a fun project, and I love the way that this looks in the space. The only problem was I didn't have some artwork that fit the scale that I could put above my fireplace. So we are going to make some today, and we're gonna do it with all of the leftover pieces that I used to make my fireplace. To go along with the wood, I also have a mirror that I saved from the bathroom renovation that we did last spring. It was on the wall, but I swapped it out for a thrifted mirror, and I saved it for a project just like this. So the first thing we need to do is cut some wood veneer to the perfect size to go behind my mirror to give it extra support. Now I had this extra wood veneer that was left over from the fireplace, and all I needed to do was cut it to the perfect size. I also had some leftover molding pieces, and this is going to be the frame around my mirror. I wanted something streamlined and simple to go with the other mirrors that are in my room. I have these tall rectangular mirrors that go above each of my nightstands, and the frame around them is very simple, very streamlined, very clean. So I wanted to mimic those mirrors so we had a cohesive look in the space. So I trimmed them with my miter saw. I just cut some 45-degree angles on each of the ends. Once they were cut, I decided that I needed to spray paint them gold because, again, I wanted them to be cohesive with those other mirrors in the room. I got some gold Rustoleum spray paint and I sprayed these trim pieces in the paint. I made sure that everything was covered thoroughly in the spray paint, and then I let them dry for 1 hour. Now I have all of my wood pieces trimmed and my mirror is prepped and ready, so let's put everything together. I'm going to be using some liquid nails. I put a whole bunch of liquid nails on the top of this veneer. You do not want this mirror to slide off, and so liquid nails is a perfect option to make sure that everything sticks together. Once I had all the liquid nails on the top of the veneer, I slowly dropped down my mirror over the top. Now this mirror is really heavy, so the weight of the mirror alone is enough that will make the wood and the mirror stick together. I used more of the liquid nails to put around the edge, and then I set my trim right over the top of the liquid nails. Now I cut all my pieces so they fit together like a puzzle. Once everything was in place, I let it dry for 24 hours. Once the 24 hours was up, I simply popped this mirror on the top of my mantle. Now this is a leaner, so I just leaned it up against the wall. And you guys, I love the way that this mirror looks. It is so pretty. It is the right scale and size for this space. The colors coordinate with the other mirror. The golds go together. The sizes also mimic each other. They're these long rectangular sizes. And I just love mirrors. I love the way that they reflect light back into the room, and they're timeless. This is not going to go out of style. The best part, I didn't spend any additional money to create this mirror. All I did was use scraps from leftover projects, and now I have a show-stopping piece that I can put above my fireplace mantle. Our next piece of wall art is going to be created by using a Dollar Tree canvas. I love using these canvases because of course they're very affordable, but you can get a variety of different sizes. The size that I'm using is an 11 by 14, which is a large size for $1.25. I'm going to paint it in some navy paint. This is a suede paint, so it has a little bit of a texture. I purchased this paint at Michael's. I poured the paint over the canvas and I spread the paint out evenly over the surface of this canvas. Then I let it dry for 1 hour. I'm going to show you guys up close how cool this paint is. It has a texture on it. It's very subtle, but it does look just like suede. For this specific art piece, I wanted to do something with botanicals, but I also wanted to have it be updated and a little more contemporary. So I went through all of my florals and I found this stem that I used at Christmas time. It has some white leaves and some silver leaves, and it has this great sheen to them. So I thought these would be perfect to use for my art piece because they're also going to pop against that dark navy blue color. So I trimmed the stem to the correct size that I wanted, and then I got some hot glue, and I'm going to hot glue these leaves and branches to the surface of the canvas. I added some hot glue to the back of the leaves and also to the stem of the branch. I curved this branch up to the top corner of the canvas, which gave it movement. Now, because it is three-dimensional, we are not going to be able to put it into a traditional frame, but that's an easy solution. All you need to do is take out the glass from the front of the frame. So that's what I did. I had this frame and I simply just removed the glass from the front. I slid my canvas into the frame, put the backing on, and now I have this 3D art that is so cool. It was so easy to do. And this is, again, a piece that you can customize into your own style and design sense. You could pick whichever flower which you wanted. You could paint your canvas in whatever color you wanted. I really like the way that my leaves pop against this dark color on the back. You could also do a set of these. How pretty would this be if you had a set of these hanging on your wall or up on a dresser? This would be so pretty. Again, super affordable. We used a Dollar Tree canvas. I used a frame that I had at home. These leaves were also from my stash. So you can make art for almost pennies on the dollar just by getting creative. A lot of you have asked about my artwork right here in the foyer. I have two collections of art that are hanging on either side of my mirror. These frames look like they are hanging from some ribbon, but guess what? It's all an illusion. Let me show you exactly how I created this. At the very top, I have a decorative piece. I purchased these at Hobby Lobby a couple of years ago. These are going to be my decorative toppers. Behind this decorative piece, I put some ribbon. Now this is ribbon that I created myself. All I did was I took a cream piece that was thicker, and then I took a Greek key ribbon and I hot glued that to the center. Now, like I said, these art pieces look like they are hanging on this ribbon, but they are not. All I did was I took a nail and I hammered it through the ribbon and into the wall, and then I put my artwork on there. I simply just hung my frames on these nails. I hung them equidistant from each other, and they look like they are just cascading down the wall. I wanted a timeless print to go inside of my frames. You guys know I love ginger jars, and I found these antique prints of ginger jars on Canva, so I created them myself. If you like these prints, you can have them. I will leave a link to the free printable in my description box so you can print them off and have one for yourself. So I added these prints to each of my frames, and I do think that it makes it classic and timeless. But again, you can customize this to your own liking. You could add some family photos, some landscapes, some pictures of your favorite vacation spa, whatever. Again, customize it to however you want it to look. Now, I also have this mirror right here that did not start off this way. It started off with a brown frame. I did not like the color of the frame, but again, that's such an easy fix. All you need to do is spray paint it or paint it with a brush in whichever color you like. But I really did love the size of this mirror, and I liked the detail that was on the frame. So I definitely wanted to use this in this space, especially because it's a 2-story room, so I needed something long and tall. So if you find a mirror that you love, but the frame isn't something that you love, don't worry, that's an easy fix, just paint it. One of my fabulous subscribers sent me this recommendation. Ellie messaged me on Instagram and she wanted me to recreate this Ginkgo wall panel from Horchow. I understand why Ellie wants to dupe this piece because it comes in at the hefty price of $1,500. I am confident that we can recreate it for so much less. The first thing that we need to do is find a frame that's similar to our inspiration piece. Now, my first thought was, well, I can just make one. I'll just head to the lumber store and get the wood and make it myself. But as I was shopping at Hobby Lobby, I came across the clearance section, the place where they have all of the frames that the glass is broken or the back is missing. And all I needed was this frame portion. This particular frame was the perfect shape and size, and it was even painted gold on the front. And the best part was it was only $17.10, which is actually a 90% off savings from what it was going for originally. So already we have hit the jackpot when it comes to bargains. The next dilemma that we need to solve is figuring out how we can create some of those branches that bend in the center. I went over to their wooden dowel section and I picked up 10 wooden dowels. These are the perfect size because they're not too wide, so you can easily bend them. The biggest obstacle that I came across was trying to find some ginkgo leaves. I could not find them anywhere. They are not that popular of an item, I guess. So as I was wandering around Hobby Lobby, I was in the wedding section of all places, and they had these gold leaves. So first up, the color and the sheen was perfect, and it did have veining on these particular leaves. And I thought I can do something with these. And for the price of $3.99 for a package of 12, it was a no-brainer. Because we need to bend our wooden dowels, I needed to secure them into our frame so they wouldn't move around. I decided I was going to get my drill and drill some holes around the frame. I drilled down only about 1/4 to 1/2 inch. You don't want to drill all the way through the frame. You just need to make a pocket for your wooden dowels to sit in so they'll stay in place. I made holes in similar places as our inspiration piece. Once all of the holes were drilled on the bottom of the frame, I moved to the top of the frame. At the top of the frame, I drilled my holes in at an angle. The reason I'm doing this is because when these wooden dowels come up in arch, we want them to come in at an angle. So on the top portion, I drilled all those holes in at angles. And then I also had a few holes that I needed to drill in on the sides. Now that all the holes are drilled, I needed to cut my wooden dowels to the correct size. So I got some wire cutters and I cut the dowels so that they would fit in the frame. I put all of the wooden dowels into the frame for a dry run. Once I thought everything looked fantastic, I pulled everything back out. And now it's time to glue everything in place. I'm gonna use some E6000. I'm gonna add the glue to the top and the bottom of my wooden dowels and then place them into the holes that we drilled in the bottom, the top, and the sides of the frame. I tried to mimic our inspiration piece almost identically with the way that the curvature of the wooden dowels went. The height of the wooden dowels and the location where we were putting them. One thing that I did do was I added a little bit of electrical tape where those wooden dowels came up and hit the center of the other wooden dowel. I wasn't 100% sure that glue would hold it, so I put some electrical tape around there to make sure that they were secured together. Once all my wooden dowels were in place, I let the E6000 dry overnight. Now it's time to paint my frame and the branches. Now the frame on this was gold on the front, but it was black on the side. So I just painted everything in this gold Rustoleum spray paint. I made sure that the frame and all of the wooden dowels were completely coated in this gold spray paint. Once everything was sufficiently coated, I let it dry for 3 hours. Now it's time to create our Ginkgo leaves. So I took my gold Hobby Lobby leaves and I removed the metal portion from the back. Then I printed off some Ginkgo leaves and then I cut them out. So I have my template of what I want my Ginkgo leaves to look like. I put this template over the top of my leaves. I traced around them with a pencil and then I cut them out. Now I made a couple of different sizes and shapes of these Ginkgo leaves. That way I had a little bit of a variety in my piece. I didn't want them to all be the same. They are very similar, but they do have some unique little indentations and designs on each of the Ginkgo leaves. Now all I need to do with my Ginkgo leaves is attach them to my wooden dowels. So I got some hot glue and I placed it on our wooden dowel branches and then I put the Ginkgo leaves over the top. I repeated this process with all 12 of my gold Ginkgo leaves. You guys, we did it! Check out this amazing Ginkgo paneled wall art. Doesn't it look fantastic? Look at how similar this is to our inspiration piece. It's almost an identical match. I cannot even tell you how excited I am to have this beautiful piece of wall art. It did take a lot of creativity to come up with solutions for the branches and the leaves and the frame. But once we did, it was so easy to put it together and to make this beautiful piece. I am pretty impressed with the way that this turned out. But do you know what's even more impressive is how much money we ended up spending, because it's not near as much as our inspiration piece. You saw that the frame was $17.10. Each of the wooden dowels were 39 cents, so I got 10 of those, that's $3.90. The Ginkgo leaves were $3.99. We will say that we used about half a can of spray paint, so that'll be $3.50. And we will lump together the little bit of E6000 and the electrical tape together and say that was $1. So in total, it cost me $29.49 to create my piece, which means we saved $1,520.51 over our inspiration piece. That's a huge savings. So Ellie, thank you for suggesting that we dupe this piece. I hope you liked it and I hope you can make one for so much less. We are going to stick with Horchow for our next dupe, and it's going to be this gorgeous dragonfly in a shadow box. Oh, I just loved this piece. I thought it would be perfect for spring and summer, all these bright, cheerful seasons coming up. I could display it on a shelf or on a table. I just really wanted to recreate this piece, especially since the cost is $660. That's a lot, but don't worry, shipping is free. So what I did to find my shadow box that was going to be affordable was I hit up the clearance section at Michael's, and I came across this shadow box that was almost identical to our inspiration piece. It's gold and it even has that textured grass cloth on the back, and it was only $15, which is 50% off the original price of this shadow box, which is a great deal. To find my dragonflies, what I did when I was at Hobby Lobby was I headed over to the wooden section where the wooden dowels were. I was already over there, and this is where I found some wooden dragonflies. I really loved all of the cutouts and the details that were on this dragonfly, but it was pretty flat and I wanted it to have a little more dimension. So when I was over in the spring section, I found another dragonfly I thought would be perfect to layer underneath our more decorative dragonfly. I'm going to paint both of my dragonflies in this gold Rustoleum spray paint. I took my pieces outside and I sprayed them thoroughly in the gold spray paint. I made sure that both of these dragonflies were completely saturated in the gold spray paint, and then I let them dry for 1 hour. While I was letting these dragonflies dry, I thought it was a perfect time to work on the mat that's going to go inside of my shadow box. I have this cardstock that is sticky on the back. It's from Cricut, and I knew that this would be perfect to create a mat out of. So I had my Cricut maker cut out a mat that was the perfect size for my shadow box. I removed the covering from the back of my mat, and then I pressed it firmly to the center of the grass cloth backing. Next, I took my dragonflies and I put some hot glue on the back of the decorative dragonfly first, and I placed it in the center of the larger dragonfly. Then I added some hot glue to the back of the large dragonfly and just pressed it into the center of the mat. Then I simply placed the backing back onto my shadow box frame, and now we are finished. Look at how pretty this piece is, you guys. I am just absolutely in love with it. This is a great way to make seasonal decorations for your home, because creating decor like this is still very classy. It's very subtle. You could put this on a shelf, like I said, or a table, on top of a dresser. Of course, you could hang it on the wall, but it just brings in that spring and summer feeling without being over the top. My daughter has actually already claimed this dragonfly for her room, so congratulations, she gets it. This is gonna be fun to have in her room. All right, so let's go over the costs of how much I spent to create my dragonfly wall art. The shadow box frame was $15. The decorative dragonfly was 99 cents, but the wooden pieces were 40% off, which brings it down to 60 cents. The larger dragonfly in the spring section was $2, but it was also 40% off, so that brings it down to $1.20. I'm going to lump together the small amount of spray paint and hot glue into a cost of 50 cents. So in total, it's going to cost me $17.30 to create my dragonfly wall art. I think that that is a bargain, especially considering how much our original piece cost. It was $660. So we saved ourselves $642.70. That is a huge savings. I was browsing through all of the wall art on the Paragold website and I came across this gorgeous cascading floral wall art. These flowers are in a shadow box frame. It is simply stunning, but the price is stunning as well. Can you see that it's $1,338? Yeah, that's gonna be too much for me, so we are going to dupe it for much less. This time we are going to be using this shadow box frame that I purchased from IKEA. The size is really great. It's a 50 by 50 centimeter. It's also the right color, so I knew it would be perfect for this project. Now we need some flowers to go inside. I was at Hobby Lobby and I went down the dried floral section and I came across these beautiful white flowers. They're the perfect size, the perfect color, and I love the way they look. I got 2 different sizes of these flowers, and I was in luck because that day all of the florals at Hobby Lobby were 40% off. These flowers are so cool. They're not wood, they're almost like foam, which is gonna be great in a shadow box because it's gonna hold its shape really well. Okay, so next we need a mat to go in the back of our shadow box. I was in the clearance section at Hobby Lobby and I came across these giant pieces of mat. I found one that was cream, which is going to be perfect for the color scheme, and the price was right at $3.74. Now we have all of our items. So the first thing we need to do is remove everything from our shadow box. Then I took the paper that was inside of the frame. I'm going to be using this as a template so I can get the correct size square for my mat, and then traced out the correct size with a pencil. I got a rotary cutter and I cut the square out with the rotary cutter. Now I have the exact size that I need to put inside my frame. Next, I'm going to take my flowers. What I need to do is cut the flowers away from this wood stem. So I got some floral cutters and I simply just snipped all of the flowers away from the stem. I did this with the large ones and the small ones and spread them out. I did a dry run with the flowers first. I placed them on top of my mat and I arranged them just the way that I wanted them to be so they were in the right spot before I glued them down permanently. To adhere the flowers to my mat, I'm going to be using some hot glue. I simply took the hot glue and I put it on the back of the flowers and then pressed them to the mat. I tried to mimic my inspiration art piece by putting several flowers in close proximity at the top and then spread out the flowers further as I got down to the bottom of the mat. I did this with all of my flowers until I was satisfied with the way that it looked. Now it's time to put everything back inside the shadow box. But before we do that, I need to remove the plastic coating that's on the plexiglass. Once that was off, I could put it back in the shadow box and then place my dried floral art inside. And finally, I replaced the backing. Now that we're done, I put it on top of my fireplace mantle. I love the way that this looks, you guys. It looks so high-end, so expensive. I love the monochromatic flowers and the shadow box frame, how they coordinate so beautifully together. You could use this in so many different areas of your home. I think it looks very similar to our inspiration piece. However, I have to say I do like mine better. I like the contrast between the cream flowers and the white frame. And I believe that my flowers look more realistic. Mine is a little bit smaller than the Paragold one, but if you remember, theirs cost $1,338. And after calculating all of the costs that went into creating my floral shadow box art, it was $39.83. That's a huge savings of our inspiration piece. I love the way my cascading floral art turned out, and we recreated it for a very affordable price. This piece is from Horchow, and you guys, it's over $4,000. Way too much for me to pay. This is what it is. It's a gorgeous piece of wall art. I love the colors, the textures, the size, everything about it is absolutely stunning, except for, of course, the price. As you can see, it is $4,125. That's way out of my budget, so let's make it for less. The first IKEA item that we are going to use in our dupes is a placemat. They have a huge variety of placemats here. Placemats are so versatile. They can be for some art. So let's see what we can do with this pretty one right here. But we are not gonna leave this placemat plain. We are going to jazz it up. And we're gonna do that with some white craft paint. So I got my craft paint and a paintbrush, and I began to paint along the outside of this placemat. I went around the rim of the placemat and then I just worked my way inside. I'm going to paint various areas on this placemat to make my artwork look unique and special. It's not identical to our inspiration piece, but it's pretty close. And I like the unique touches that we added to make ours one of a kind. So once I had all the paint on my placemat, I let it dry for 1 hour. In the meantime, while this paint was drying, it's time to focus on the frame. Now the frame in our inspiration piece is a lucite frame. My frame is from the thrift store and it was only $5.99. What we're gonna do with my frame is we are going to paint it white. So I had to remove the glass and the backing from the frame, and then I took my frame outside and I sprayed it in some white gloss Rustoleum spray paint. I made sure it was completely saturated in the spray paint. I painted the top, the sides, and once it was completely done, I let it dry for 2 hours. The backing on our inspiration piece was neutral and it looked like it was textured. And so I wanted to do something very similar, and I remembered that I had some leftover fabric from when we redid the dining room. I reupholstered these chairs and I had some of this leftover fabric. And so that's what we're going to use. I cut out a square of this fabric and I covered the backing from my frame. I got some hot glue and I hot glued the fabric to the back of the frame to make it stay in place. Then I took my placemat and I put it in the center of our square. I got a ruler out to make sure that it was centered, and then I got some hot glue and I hot glued the placemat to the backing. Now that everything's been transformed, it's time to put it back together. So I got my frame and I put my glass in first, then I put in our artwork. Now, because we have a 3D placemat in the front, it's not going to fit like it did originally. It's gonna poke out just a little bit in the back. So I was able to clamp down a couple of the staples, but in order to secure it really well together, I got some clear packing tape and I put it around the edge where the backing and the frame meet. That way, the artwork does not fall out of the frame. Now we are finished with our artwork. I love the way that this turned out. It would be a beautiful piece in so many different decor styles. And I think it is very similar to our inspiration piece. Well, similar in the fact that they look the same, but they certainly do not cost the same. So let's go over the cost of how much I spent to create my wall art. The placemat from IKEA was $7. The frame from the thrift store was $5.99. The square of fabric was $3. We'll say that we spent like a quarter on the craft paint. We didn't use that much. So in total, it's going to cost me $16.25 to create my wall art. I love that cost. That is a great cost for this beautiful wall art. And that means that we saved $4,108.75 over the Horchow piece. Love it. We are duping high-end decor from the Pottery Barn with much less expensive pieces from the thrift store. I had a request from one of my fabulous subscribers to make a wall art piece similar to the one that I found on the Pottery Barn website. It is this palm leaf shadow box wall art. This is such a cool piece of art. It would go with a lot of different styles and designs. I love the size, however, it is $399, which is quite expensive, and I know that we can recreate it for less. So the first thing that we need is a frame. I headed to my local thrift store. They always have such an amazing variety of frames there. I found one that had a thin frame and it was square. It was the perfect size and shape, and the best part is that it was only $5.99. What we want to use is the frame and not the art that's inside. So we're gonna remove the art and the mat from the frame, and then I carefully lifted out the glass so that we were left with just the frame only. I don't know how long it was at the thrift store, so I washed it with a damp cloth to make sure it was nice and clean, so when we spray paint it, the paint will adhere to the frame. I'm going to be using some white gloss Rustoleum spray paint to paint our frame white. I took it outside and I sprayed it in the spray paint. I made sure that the entire frame was covered in the spray paint. I did the front, the sides, and painted the inside of the frame as well to make sure it was all one cohesive color. Once it was completely coated in the paint, I let it dry for 2 hours. While the paint is drying, this is a perfect time for us to get started on our palm leaf. We are going to make ours out of some poster board. I picked up mine at Target. They were only 99 cents, which is cheaper than in the Dollar Tree, so that's a great place to get your poster board. What I'm gonna do with my poster board is cut strips out of it. So I got my self-healing mat and I put my poster board over the top. Then I got a pencil and a ruler and I marked out 1.5 inch wide segments. Then I got my rotary cutter and I cut the poster board into strips. One poster board was large enough to give me all the pieces that I needed to create this palm art. Once I had all the poster board strips, I cut them into various lengths. I did a 7, 8, 9, 10, and 11 inch long strips. Once all of these segments were cut, I folded them in half. Then I cut the top with scissors into points. I repeated this process with all of my poster board pieces. Now it's time to create our fan. So I took the smallest 7 inch segment first. I put some hot glue in the center, pressed it together, and then I put some hot glue on the outside. Then I took my second folded segment of poster board and pressed it firmly to the first segment. I repeated the process of hot gluing the inside and the outside of the folded poster board pieces in ascending order until I had half of the fan hot glued and connected together. Then I got started on the second half of the fan. Again, I took the shortest 7 inch segment first. I put some hot glue on it, and then I just hot glued all of the other poster board pieces together. This time I divided it up into 3 different segments. That way when I put it all together, I could move everything around and make sure that it was all nice and evenly fanned out. We need to create a background that's similar to our inspiration piece background. I have this fabric, it's leftover fabric. It's actually from my dining chairs, and it is the perfect match to our inspiration piece. So what I'm gonna do with my fabric is put it over the self-healing mat and then take the back of the frame and place that over my fabric. Then I got a ruler and my rotary cutter, and I simply just cut around the backing of the frame. This will give me a perfect square that will fit right on top of the backing. Once my square was cut out, I got some hot glue and I put it along the edge of the backing. I kept the hot glue to the edges, that way we didn't have any lumps or bumps in the center of the fabric. I continued to add the hot glue to the edges and then pressed the fabric into the hot glue. Now it's time to adhere the fan to the fabric. So what I did was I just took some hot glue and I put it on the back of the first half of the fan, and then I pressed it firmly to the fabric. I added a bunch of hot glue in various places on the backing of the fan. You don't want this to move around, you want it to be stable. So adding a decent amount of hot glue will hold everything in place. Then I took the additional segments for the other side of the fan and added the hot glue to the back of those and placed them in the right spots to create the other half of my fan. I did cut some additional segments of poster board for filler just in case I needed it. So I did add a couple extra little fan pieces in there to make my palm leaf look nice and full. Now that the palm leaf is in place, we need to add a stem. So I just cut a rectangle and just rounded the top, got some hot glue, added it to the back and pressed it to the fan. Now in my inspiration piece, if you zoom in really close, you can see there's like some frayed pieces of either fabric or paper. So in order to recreate that, what I'm gonna do is get some cotton balls and I'm just gonna pull them apart, add a little bit of hot glue to the fan, and then put the cotton ball right over the top. I think that this mimics our inspiration piece fantastically. Plus, as a bonus, it is hiding all of the places where the fans are connected. You never want to see the mechanics of how everything is stuck together. So these cotton ball pieces are a great way to hide all of that. Now that our palm leaf art is done, all we need to do is put it right back into the frame. I flip my frame over and put our art right back in the center. One thing that we are not going to be doing is putting the glass back over the front. We don't have the space for it because of the 3D palm leaf. Our inspiration piece was a shadow box. Ours is just going to be an open frame. We will have our 3D palm art stick out, which is just fine for me. I actually really like it this way. So that is one liberty that we are going to take over our inspiration piece. And that's it, we are done. Look at how fantastic this palm art looks compared to our inspiration piece. I think they look so similar. They're similar in size, the leaves are the same, the backing's the same. I just really love the way that this turned out. And the best part is finding out the price differentiation from our inspiration piece to what I made. So let's calculate my expenses. In total, it cost me $14 to create my palm leaf wall art. I think that that is a steal. Finding the frame from the thrift store was a great jumping off point to create our wall art. For $5.99, it kept everything in budget. Using the poster board was cost efficient, and all the other little pieces didn't add up to much. So if you think you can't get a high-end piece of wall art, you can head to your thrift store. That's a great place to start. I'm going to layer a beautiful wintry print in front of the mirror. This print is from my website and it coordinates with the other prints that are in the other room, these beautiful winter village scenes. I selected this particular painting because of the color scheme. It had those blue and whites in the print and I knew that it would coordinate beautifully with my color palette. I placed this print in an ornate frame that adds to the lavish design of this mantelscape. I will leave a link to this print in my description box. I have a mirror that's just been slapped on the wall. It's frameless and you can see it in pretty much every home. So we're gonna get a new mirror, a new / thrifted mirror. I wanted something fancy, but I didn't want to pay a gazillion dollars for it. So I thought, let's head to the thrift store and see if we can find something there. Happy day for me, they had this beautiful mirror. I fell in love with the detail that was around the frame. The size, of course, was perfect, and do you know what else was fantastic? The price. It was only $24. Now, is this mirror in perfect condition? Absolutely not. There's a lot that needs to be done to it. There are some chips and some dings and some cracks. So what I did was I filled in the large divots with some wood filler and then I sanded everything down. Once that was done, I gave the mirror a good washing. I knew that I wanted to change the paint color. That was pretty evident. It was this white kind of creamish color and it looked really dirty. To prep my mirror, I got some butcher paper and painter's tape and I protected the mirror. Then I took it outside and I sprayed it in some gold Rustoleum spray paint. I did a few coats of the spray paint. I wanted to make sure the frame was completely saturated in the paint and then I let it dry for 3 hours. Isn't this mirror transformation stunning? You would never know that we bought this at the thrift store for $24 and gave it a makeover. I wanted to create a gallery wall inside of all my rectangular trim molding. My inspiration came from Restoration Hardware. I love the botanical prints that they had in this particular gallery wall, so it's going to give us our jumping off point. I needed some fairly large frames to fit the inside of these rectangles, and as you know, frames can get so expensive. So my solution was to go to Michael's and get some poster frames. At the time I went, they were buy one, get one free, and the size is a 16 by 20, which is perfect for this space. The initial color on these frames was black, and that's not really gonna fit in with my color scheme, but again, that's an easy fix. So I just slid off the trim pieces from around the frame, and I took them outside and I sprayed them in some gold Rustoleum spray paint, the same paint that I used on my mirror frame. I sprayed the first side really well with the spray paint, made sure everything was covered in the gold, then I let it dry for 1 hour. I flipped the frame pieces over and sprayed the other side. Again, I made sure that everything was 100% saturated in the gold paint, and then I let it dry for 2 more hours. To create this artwork itself, I'm going to do it in the most affordable way possible. So to do this frame piece right here, the back matting, I'm just gonna use some poster board. I went to Target, I picked up some pieces there. They were 99 cents a piece, and I just simply cut them to the size that would fit inside my frame. To create this mat that goes around the botanical print, I just used some cardstock and my Cricut. I had my Cricut maker cut out these frame mats, and then for the actual prints themselves, I selected 6 classy botanical prints. These floral prints are available on my website. I love the pop of color this art adds to my large white walls. These 6 prints are beautiful individually, but coordinate together as a set. I got some double-sided tape and I added it to the back of my cardstock frame mat. And then I took my botanical print and I placed it in the center. Then I got some more of that double-sided tape and I placed it on the back of my frame mat again and put it right in the center of my poster board. Now it's time to reassemble everything. I took my newly created artwork and I placed the plexiglass over the top and I put the backing underneath, and then I slid the painted gold trim pieces back onto the frame. I continued this process with the remaining 5 pieces of art. Check out this gallery wall. It is just beautiful. You could do more pictures, you could do less, you could use different size frames. If you have a large wall and you just don't know what to do with it, this is a great solution. Let's go on a little shopping trip to my favorite thrift store. I always find diamonds in the rough at this store. I already had a project in mind, so when I got there, I knew exactly what I was looking for. I needed 2 large frames. I didn't care what artwork was inside. I was more interested in the frame. I found these on the wall. I really loved the streamline look of the frame, and the price was right at $9.99 a piece. So as lovely as these prints are, we are going to be swapping them out. So the first thing I needed to do was remove everything from the frame. So I removed the tape on the back and pulled out the backing with the print on it, and then removed the glass as well. So I just had the wood frames. The frame color was similar, but it was not identical, so it needed to be painted, and I'm going to be using this Rustoleum Country Gray chalk paint. I took my frames outside and I sprayed them in this paint. I made sure that the outside of the frame was painted and the inside was painted as well, and of course the front of. Once everything was painted in this Country Gray spray paint, I let it dry for 2 hours. While the paint was drying, I needed to create some new art to go in my frames. So I created this contemporary landscape. I created a set of 8 because we were going to be creating a gallery in each of these frames. So instead of having a whole bunch of frames all over the wall, we're going to use these 2 frames, but we're going to put 4 prints in each frame. So now that I have my prints done, I wanted to have some mats. So I got some cardstock, just white cardstock, and instead of cutting them out, because 8 is a lot of mats to cut out and you want them to be identical, I had my Cricut maker cut them out for me. That way I knew they were uniform. If you're handy with scissors and a ruler and feel like you can do it that way, then totally cut them out by hand. All right, so now we have our prints, and we are not going to keep those prints. We need to cover them up. So we need a neutral backdrop. I'm going to be using some gift wrap. I purchased this at Hobby Lobby. I love this color. It's like a beige and a white stripe. It's a perfect backdrop for our framed art. So what I did is I got some Mod Podge and a sponge brush, and I added the Mod Podge to the top of the original art print. Then I took my wrapping paper, which I had cut into the exact same size it needed to go over the top, and I placed it over the top of the Mod Podge. Then I got a scraper tool and I pressed those two pieces together. Doing this also removes any of the air bubbles that might be trapped inside so that the paper can lay flat. Once the paper was in place, I let the Mod Podge dry for 2 hours. Now I have all of my pieces, so let's assemble. I'm going to take my art print and then get the mat. I'm going to get some double-sided tape and place it over the top of the paper, and then put my mat over the top of that. I cut my mat to fit exactly over a 8.5 by 11 size piece of copy paper. That way I didn't have to do any additional cutting. I repeated this process with all 8 of my art prints. Then I took the backing that was covered in the gift wrap and I added my prints to the top. I spread them out equally. Then I got some hot glue and I hot glued these prints directly to the backing. I did this with the remaining art pieces until my collage of modern landscapes were in place. And then I did the exact same thing with the other 4 pieces on the second piece of art. And now all I need to do is slide them back into the original frames. I hung one above each of their beds in their bedroom, and I absolutely love the way that these turned out. And you guys, we did not use any white or any gold spray paint on this project. Way out of my comfort zone. Who am I right now? I don't know, but I think it looked beautiful. I loved this gray color scheme with the muted color tone. And they started out as a pretty questionable and $9.99 thrifted piece. I began my search. I looked online, I looked in stores, I looked on Facebook Marketplace with no success, 0. I could not find something that was this size in my style and also in my price range. So as a last ditch effort, I decided to go to my thrift store. I went and I found this mirror behind a couple of other knickknacks and other mirrors, and it was perfect. The perfect size. There was minimal damage to it, and as you can see, that price was only $40. Definite score. So I scooped it up, I brought it home, and now I'm going to transform it. The first thing that I had to do was address the nicks and the scratches and the dings. Now there weren't too many on this particular mirror, but I thought it necessary to sand down those raised edges where the scrapes were and really clean it up. I washed it really thoroughly and dried it. The reason why I do that is because the paint will adhere better to the frame if it's a clean, dry surface. So next I need to protect the actual mirror itself. I ran out of butcher paper, so I needed a solution, and guess what? Plain old wrapping paper is going to do the trick. So I got everyday wrapping paper and I placed it over the top of my mirror. And then I also got some blue painter's tape and I taped along the edges. Now that my mirror is prepped and ready for paint, I took it outside and I decided to use this Rustoleum spray paint. It is by the name, a metallic warm gold. I haven't used this color before. I wanted to give it a shot. I liked it because it's more of a champagne color and not a bright gold. which is gonna be perfect in this dining room. So I began to spray my mirror frame in this paint. I made sure that each part of the frame was evenly covered in the spray paint. I got inside the mirror and on the outside, in all of the divots and intricate design detail. Once I was finished with the first coat, I let it dry for 1 hour, and then I came back and I did the exact same thing. I sprayed each part of the frame in this spray paint. I made sure it was even and completely coated, and then I let it dry completely, which took 2 hours. Now that it's dry, I can bring it back inside, and I removed that wrapping paper and blue painter's tape to reveal a brand new mirror. Simply cleaning it up and giving the frame a fresh coat of paint completely transformed it. This mirror is pretty stunning, if I do say so myself, and it looks like I spent hundreds of dollars, which you guys know I would not do. So I just spent the $40 on the mirror and the cost of spray paint. So it was so affordable. It reflects light back into the room, it reflects the beautiful chandelier, and it makes the space feel so much larger. I tell you, do not sleep on your thrift store or Facebook Marketplace or even garage sales. If you just keep your eyeballs open, you could find a treasure. If you're looking for a beautiful piece of wall art that needs just a little bit of love or simply a paint change, try those places out, because like me, you may end up with a treasure that did not break the bank. Have you ever been at the store or online and you found something you absolutely loved, and then you looked at the price tag and it just broke your heart because it was way out of your budget? Well, that's what happened to me when I saw this set of 2 branch wall art pieces on the Horchow website. This 3D art is cast brass in an antique gold leaf frame with crystal detail. This set of 2 was $1,500 for 2. So, oh, and that didn't even include shipping. It was like $165 for shipping too. That's not gonna happen. So I am going to recreate it, and I got some canvas at the Dollar Tree. They are 11 by 14 in size, and I will say that my inspiration piece was 24 inches wide by 42 inches tall, so it is quite larger than my piece that I'm gonna make, but that's okay, mine's gonna be just perfect. So with my canvas, I'm going to first trace out my branch detail. I'm gonna do it with just a regular old pencil. It's important to trace out your design first, because if you don't like your design or you mess up, you can easily erase it at this point. But if you paint your canvas first and then mess up and erase, there is a possibility that you could erase some of the paint and then you'll have to start over. So doing your design first is easy because you can always paint over pencil. To create the same muted background in my inspiration piece, I'm going to start off using some Armor metallic paint. I purchased this at Michael's. It was $5.99, but I had a 20% off coupon, and so it brought the price down to $4.79. What I did with my paint was I first watered it down a little bit. That way this softens the color of it and it gives it a little more fluidity as you're putting it on your canvas. You can always add more paint, but it's hard to remove once it's on. So I'm adding it in small amounts and in a watered down version. I used quick brush strokes up and down. This motion softens the edges so you can't see the brush strokes. The second layer of paint that I'm using is this metallic steel paint. I got this from Target. I already had it. I got it like a year ago. I placed the darker shade in the corners, along the edges, and at various places on the canvas where the shading was darker against the branches. The top layer is just some gold craft paint. Again, I purchased this at Michael's. I'm going to brush this gold paint on the same way with quick even strokes to minimize brush marks and soften all of the edges. This gold was the perfect top layer. It added extra dimension and sheen to my background. I think my background version is pretty spot on to the inspiration piece. I love the way that all these layers came together to add one subtle muted backdrop. Once I was finished with the paint, I let it dry completely. Now I had to do some serious brainstorming to think of a solution. to create some branches. I thought if I used real branches, they would be too bulky and I would never be able to get them the same shape as the inspiration piece. So my solution is hot glue, because I can mold that hot glue to the exact shape that I need. And it can be three-dimensional. I began hot gluing along the traced lines. The best part about recreating these branches is the more uneven, the better. I'm not looking for straight lines, so having an unsteady, shaky hand is actually going to work to your benefit during this project. So I just continued to hot glue along those lines. I did go back over some of the branches with extra hot glue to make them thicker and add more dimension. After I was done hot gluing my branches, I did have those little strings, so I just pulled some of those off to make sure that the canvas was really clean and that the branches didn't have any of those rogue pieces of hot glue strings all over them. Once all of my hot glue branches were created, it was time to paint them. I'm using some premium ultra bright gold paint. I got a smaller paintbrush and I painted along each one of the branches. These branches are uneven and the paint spotlights the three-dimensional shape by adding highlights to the top and brightening up the edges and indentations. Once my branches were fully painted, on the sides, the top, on the edges, I let it dry completely overnight. Now it's time for my favorite part, and that is to add the sparkle. I got this bag of glass vase fillers on clearance for 62 cents. So hello, that was such a great score. And I picked out the clear pieces. Again, I'm using my hot glue gun. I hot glued the back of the bead before I added it to my canvas. The reason why I did that is because I wanted to minimize the strings from the hot glue, and by putting it onto the bead first and then placing it onto my canvas, it minimized having all those strings all over it. So I continued to place the clear beads all over the branches until everyone was in their spot. Now that my artwork is all finished, it's time to place them in my frames. Now the frames were the biggest cost to this project. I got them at Michael's, however, I got there on a day where the frames were 70% off. So my 11 by 14 sized gold frame was originally 22 something, and I ended up getting them for $6.90 a piece, which is great because these are classy frames. If I ever want to change out the canvas, I can switch it out for something else, and the frames are just timeless. So I needed to first remove the mat and the glass. Since this is 3D, we don't need the glass in place. So I took those out, and then I put my artwork inside and placed the backing on again, and now my artwork is finished. You guys, how pretty are these? I can't believe how similar they are to my inspiration piece, and we recreated it for so much less. Let's go over the cost breakdown really fast. I spent $2 on the canvas. We're gonna round, I hope that's okay. I spent $4.79, so we'll round that to $5 on the paint. The biggest cost was the frames. We'll round that to $14. And the beads were 62 cents, so we'll round that to $1. For a grand total of $22, I was able to get a set of 2 beautiful pieces of artwork. That saves me $1,478 from our original inspiration piece, and we didn't have to pay for shipping. So we saved even more that way too. We are going to layer some pieces on our fireplace mantle. Now we have a mirror above, but we are going to still add some art. I'm going to take this gorgeous fall piece of wall art and I'm going to put it on this side of our mirror. I can just lean it right up against the wall, right in front of my mirror. This more orangish copper frame coordinates beautifully with the fall leaves that are on our art print. This is an art print that you can get on my website, and you can still use that 10% off coupon with Lisa10. The different materials that we're using on this fireplace mantle display makes it look so unique and one of a kind. The layered accessories create depth and visual interest. Let's explore one more fireplace mantle because variety is key. In my bedroom, I have another fireplace mantle display. On this fireplace mantle, I have a trio of ginger jars on one side. To add balance and symmetry, I have a large white orchid floral arrangement on the opposite side. I added these same fall leaves that I got at Michael's on this fireplace mantle, and then placed several decorative plush pumpkins over the top of the leaves. I added another gorgeous fall print. This time it has a more simplistic frame around it. This print is also from my website. Changing the decor on your fireplace mantle with the seasons keeps the fireplace area fresh and inviting throughout the year. By combining different elements, we were able to put together a stylish mantle that's visually appealing and balanced. The possibilities are endless when it comes to decorating a fireplace mantle. I love it when I show up at events and there is a sign specifically saying, "Welcome to the party." First of all, it's a custom and unique idea and I absolutely love it. But secondly, it just makes me feel better that I know I'm in the right spot. So we are going to make a sign next. I was moseying around the aisles at Target and all of the frames just happened to be 25% off. So I headed down that aisle and I came across a poster board frame. It was a great size, it's 16 by 20, but the best part is that it was only $4.50. Great, great price. I scooped it up quickly, put it in my cart, brought it home. So this is the frame that we are going to be using to create our sign. The only thing that I did not love about it was that the frame pieces all around the edges, it was black. And I'm a gold girl, and so I took those off, and guess what? We are going to spray paint them gold. We're gonna be doing it with some Rustoleum metallic gold spray paint. Took my pieces outside, and I began to spray the paint all over these pieces. I made sure that each part was completely covered in the gold spray paint. Once the first side was completely coated in the paint, I let it dry for an hour. Then I came back, flipped them over to the other side, and began to spray paint the other side. Once these pieces were completely covered in the paint, I let them dry completely, which took another hour. While I was waiting for everything to dry, I thought this would be a great time to create my lettering. Now, I did use my Cricut for this part. I created this design and I had my Cricut maker just cut it out. I am using a removable vinyl, so at a later date, I can remove this vinyl and use this frame for another party or another event. I am using my Cricut, but if you don't have one, you have another option. You can do the exact same process as we did to create our grazing table sign. Just print something off. You can write with a paint pen directly onto that plexiglass to get the exact same look. I want to use my accent wrapping paper for this project as well. So what I did was I cut out the exact same size that would fit over the back portion of my frame. I got some double-sided tape. I placed that on the back and then pressed the wrapping paper to the cardboard. I wanted the white lettering to pop. So in order to do that, I got some more wrapping paper. This time I got a gold wrapping paper and I cut it to the size that would fit directly behind the rectangle that was designed on my wording. Again, I got some double-sided tape. I taped the gold wrapping paper in place. Finally, I took the plexiglass, I placed it over the wrapping paper. Then I got my gold frame pieces and slipped those back into place. I wanted to add some pretty florals to the top corner of my frame. In order to do that, I got another piece of Dollar Tree floral foam. I cut that in half and then I notched out a little piece in the center of the floral foam. I cut that piece right out so that the floral foam would fit over the top of my frame. To start off with, we are going to be using some more of those wrapping paper fans. I placed them on each end and in the center. Then I got my greenery out and I placed the greenery around the floral foam. And now we're just gonna go to town with those pretty florals. The white and the pastel pink roses, they're the same flowers that I used in my grazing table sign. I loved these feminine flowers and colors. They're gonna be perfect for the bridal shower. To hold my sign up, I am using a wreath stand. And instead of placing a wreath on that hook, I placed the frame hanger right over the hook. And now we're finished with our custom sign. It was incredibly affordable to make. We spent $4.50 on that frame. We spent, I don't know, cents on the wrapping paper. I had the vinyl. We spent, $1 on the floral foam, and then we had the Dollar Tree florals. This sign looks very expensive and high-end, but we hardly spent any money. Now, I found this sign on Etsy and I just fell in love with it. Absolutely beautiful. It's so festive, it's got a classy touch, and I thought, oh, this is perfect. I completely want to make a version for myself. The problem was, on the Etsy website, it was around $100, which isn't terrible, but I knew that we could make it for so much less, so that's what we are going to do today. So first off, I headed to my wood pile out in my garage. This is where all of my excess wood from all of my projects is. I selected a piece that was perfect for my sign. I got out my jigsaw and I cut the wood to size. Now, my inspiration piece had some trim molding around the edges to create a frame. And so I wanted to do the exact same thing. Again, I'm going to be using some trim molding that was left over from all the molding that I did on the wall in my dining room. If you remember, we saw that dining room transformation last week, and I had a lot of extra molding left over from the gorgeous designs that we created on the wall. I again got out another one of my favorite saws. This time we're getting out the miter saw, and I cut my wood trim at 45-degree angles to create pieces that were perfect to go along the edge to create a frame on my sign. Now that I have the large wood piece for the sign and the trim for the edges, we are going to stain this large piece of wood that's going to create our sign. I'm going to be using this Rustoleum antique white wood stain. I already have this, so again, this is not going to cost me any additional money. What I did was I got a sponge brush and I added the stain to the wood. I painted it all over the entire surface of this wood piece. Once it was completely coated in the paint, I got a paper towel and I wiped off the excess stain. The reason why I'm wiping off the excess is because I want to be able to see the grain that's in the wood. The white stain did dry pretty solidly, but you can still see a little bit of the grain that's running through the sign. You can see it just kind of peeking through, which is the look that I really was going for. Once it was all painted and the excess stain was wiped off, I let it dry completely, which took overnight. I had a hard time finding a font that mimicked exactly my inspiration piece font. So what I did was I just created my own. So I wrote Christmas out in this twirly scroll Christmas. Oh, I just love the way it looks. It's just, I don't know, fancy, but classy at the same time. And the way that we're going to create all of the detail and the wording on my sign is we're going to be using my Cricut Maker. So I started off by getting some red permanent vinyl. This is a smart vinyl. In my Cricut design space, I hit new project. Then I went to upload because we're uploading a custom design I created. So I hit upload image. I'd saved my custom design in my downloads. All I needed to do was select, drag, and drop it right into my design space. Now I can remove the background by hitting moderately complex because this isn't a very complex image. Then I hit continue, and then I took that crossbar and I just selected the background. In all those little places, I just want to get rid of the white so that the background just disappears and I just have Christmas. Then I hit apply and continue. Then I selected my design and I hit upload. Now I can select it again and put add to canvas. Now I can create the size that I need. So it's just a custom size that will fit my board. So I made it to the size I needed and then clicked make it. At this point, I selected continue, and then I chose my material, which was a smart vinyl permanent, and I hit more on the pressure. I loaded it into my Cricut Maker, and then I hit the flashing arrow button, which measured it out to make sure I had enough vinyl. Once it was done measuring, I hit the flashing play button, which began the cutting process. When it was done cutting, I hit the flashing arrow button and it released my vinyl. To create all of my other lettering on my sign, I'm going to be using a black smart vinyl. In my Cricut design space, I hit new project, then I went to images. In the search bar, I typed in banner. Several options came up. I scrolled down and selected this banner right here and hit add to canvas. Then I went and I unlocked the size and I typed in the custom size I needed. At this point I hit text. I typed in @ put it above my banner, put the font the size I needed, and then I rotated it so it would fit in my banner. Next I moved it so it was in the center. Then I hit text again and I typed in the. I did the exact same thing. I put the font size to the same, similar as I did the @ and I rotated it as well and moved it to the center of the second side of the banner. Then I hit select all and went down and pressed attach. And now the banner and the lettering are welded together and create one design. Then I hit text and I typed in welcome to. Then I went up to the font. I knew the font I wanted, so I typed that in the search bar. I selected it to change the font. Then I unlocked the size and typed in the custom size that I needed. And kind of moved that out of the way. Next I hit text again and I typed in Burningham's. And then I went to font and I knew the font that I needed, so I typed that in the search bar as well, selected it to change the font. I unlocked the size and typed in the custom size. Now I did go back later on and change this to all uppercase letters. Then I hit text again. And once I did that, I realized I forgot the E on welcome. So I quickly edited that. And then I wrote established in 1999 because that's how long we've been married. Then I went back up to the font and in the search bar, I typed in the font that I wanted. I selected it to change the font. And then I just kind of moved it around so I could see it a little bit better. Then I went up to the lock, I unlocked it so I could type in the custom size that I wanted for my lettering. And finally, I went to images and in the search bar, I typed in Christmas corner bracket. Several options came up. I scrolled down and I selected the one with the hanging stars. I hit add to canvas. I've got a lot of things on my canvas right now, so I moved it out of the way so I could see it a little bit more clearly. I unlocked the size. I typed in the custom size that I wanted, and then I went over and I hit duplicate because I needed 2. But I wanted this one to be on the other side, so I flipped it. And believe it or not, we have all of our pieces. So I hit make it. Sorted it onto my mat. We are doing it without a mat because we are using a smart vinyl. I hit continue. At this point, I selected my smart vinyl permanent and I hit more on the pressure. I loaded my smart vinyl into my Cricut Maker. I hit the flashing arrow button, which measured out to the correct size. Once it was completed, I hit the flashing play button, which began the cutting process. Once it was all done cutting all of my wording, I hit the flashing arrow button, which released my vinyl. And for my cute little trees, I'm going to be using a green and white checked vinyl. In my Cricut design space, I hit new project, I clicked on images. In the search bar, I typed in Christmas trees. Several options came up. I scrolled down and selected this tree right here and hit add to canvas. In my canvas, I selected my tree and then went up and unlocked the size so I could type in the custom size that I needed for my sign. Once it was the correct size, I went over and I hit duplicate, so I had 2 trees. And then I hit make it. Now I can select if I'm going to do it with the mat or without. This is going to be on the mat. And then I hit continue. At this place, you can select your material. I am using a premium vinyl, and I always hit more on the pressure. I'm going to be putting this vinyl on a mat. I loaded my mat into the Cricut Maker. I hit the flashing arrow button, which loaded my vinyl into the Maker. Then I hit that flashing play button, which began the cutting process. Once my trees were all cut, I hit that flashing arrow button, which released my mat, and now I have my beautiful trees. At this point, I just weeded away all of the excess vinyl from around my wording. Then I got some transfer tape and I placed it over the top of my wording. Then I got a large scraper tool and I pressed the transfer tape and the vinyl firmly together. Then I removed the backing from the vinyl. Now I can place my vinyl on my sign. So I needed it to be exactly in the center, so I measured out where it would be, and then I put my vinyl right on the wood. I got that scraper tool and I pressed the vinyl firmly to the wood, and then I removed the transfer tape. I continued the process of weeding away all of the excess vinyl from all of the other words, and then I did the same thing where I put the transfer tape over the top, pressed everything firmly together, removed the backing from the vinyl, and then placed my wording on my sign. I pressed it firmly to my sign with my large scraper tool and then removed the transfer tape. I did the same thing with my 2 trees. I placed them in the bottom corners, and then for the top, I placed them in the upper corners of my sign. Now I have all my vinyl on my sign. Woo, that was a process, but oh my goodness, I absolutely love the way that it looks. It looks so similar to my inspiration piece. And then the only thing that I have to do now is add my molding pieces around the edge. Now the reason why I waited this long to do it is because when I was putting all the transfer tape and everything on, I wanted to be able to flatten everything out really nicely, and I didn't want the transfer tape and the vinyl and everything to stick to the sides. So we're putting it on now. The way I'm going to be doing it is with some liquid nails. We're serious about this molding sticking to the sign. So what I did was I just ran a line of liquid nails along the edge of my wood, and then I placed my molding pieces right over the top of the liquid nails. I let this dry overnight, that way it would be on there permanently. And now we are all finished. Can you believe how easy that was? I just am so in love with the way that this sign looks, and it looks so similar to my inspiration piece. But it costs much, much less. So let's find out how much I spent on my sign. So as you saw, we had extra wood, so it's not gonna cost me any extra for this large piece, and also for the trim molding. Those were just leftovers, so that's $0. I already had the stain, so that's again not gonna cost me any money. I'm going to estimate about $10 on the vinyl and the transfer tape. And liquid nails I already had. I can't think of anything else that we spent. So for me to create this sign, it only cost $10, which is a huge savings over our inspiration piece. For today's project, I have braved 7 years bad luck to show you how to make this broken mirror Christmas tree, and I think it was worth it. My inspiration for this piece came a while back when I was watching Rebecca Robeson on YouTube, and she made a broken mirror Christmas tree, and I absolutely loved it. And then a little later, I was scrolling through Etsy for some design inspiration, and I came across this broken mirror Christmas tree again. And it just reminded me how much I loved it in the first place. Now, my inspiration piece, this one on Etsy, goes for $425. That's a lot, but don't worry because the shipping is free. But I think that we can do much better. First, I needed to come up with a frame. I found a 2 foot wide by 4 foot tall piece of wood at Lowe's. It was a screaming deal. It was only $6.58. I loved the swirls in the grain, and I really wanted to highlight those. And so what I decided to do was to stain it in this Minwax pickled oak stain. That way it was still stained, it was a little more transparent, and it would really highlight all the swirls in the grain. So I painted on the stain with a sponge brush across the entire surface of the wood. Then I removed the excess stain with a paper towel. I let the stain dry for several hours before flipping it over, and I repeated the process on the other side. I painted the entire surface with the stain, and then I wiped it down with a paper towel. I really love the way this almost transparent stain highlights the wood grain while still remaining a neutral backdrop so that the Christmas tree can take center stage. The next step was to add some trim to the perimeter of my board. This way it would create a frame effect. The trim that I'm using is left over from a previous project, so it's not going to cost me any extra money. And the best part about this is that I get to break out my miter saw. I love getting this saw out. It makes me feel like a professional, like I'm super cool. So I got my saw out, and at first I measured my trim to get the exact size that I needed for each of the 4 pieces of wood that would go on each side of the frame. Then I took my saw and I cut some 45-degree angles, and I repeated this process until each piece of wood was cut to the correct size. I'm going to get a sponge brush, and I'm going to liberally paint each piece of trim in the pickled oak stain. Then I'm going to get a paper towel and wipe off any excess stain, and then let the trim pieces dry completely. I added some liquid nails to the back of my trim, and then I placed it firmly on the board and then let it dry for several hours. Even though we used some liquid nails on our trim, I'm going to go back through with my nail gun and put a few finishing nails in through the back into the trim to secure it together. The final step was to fill in the corner edges with a little wood filler so there wouldn't be any gaps in the seams where the trim came together. All right, now that our base is completely finished and dried, it's time to move on to the fun part, and that is breaking the mirror. Now, I purchased this mirror at Walmart. It was only $6.44, and for this size, I think that that is a great deal. The next step is to take a thick contractor's garbage sack and place my mirror inside. Then I took a second bag and placed it over the top to double bag the mirror for extra safety precautions. All right, I'm going to be using some safety goggles, and then also I have some gloves with a really thick coating on it so they're not just plastic gloves. This will protect my hands just in case any rogue pieces of mirror go flying anywhere. And as you saw, I put my mirror into some industrial sized leaf kind of garden trash bags. They're really thick, so if there's any extra mirror, it will not come through these bags. And then I have a hammer. One other thing to remember is keep it on a hard, flat surface. A table will maybe bounce around a little bit, so on the ground is going to work really well for me. So here we go. Wish me luck. Hope this is a good idea. If you're having a hard time breaking the glass with this side, flip it around to the other side and that will work really well. Once I was finished breaking my mirror, I peeked inside the bag to make sure that the pieces were the size that I wanted. When I was satisfied, I took the mirror very carefully out of those lawn bags, and then I placed it right back on top of the lawn bag. Now it's time to sort my mirror pieces. I took the back of a hammer and I pulled up the mirror pieces, and then I began to sort them out individually by size. On the back side of this particular mirror was a thick piece of paper. So each individual piece of mirror had to be peeled away from the paper, which was a little time consuming, but I think that it really prevented that mirror from splintering and shattering everywhere, kind of kept it together, so I was grateful for the paper. It didn't really bother me to pull that off. During this process, I did keep my thick gloves on and my safety goggles. I did a dry run of the placement of my mirrored pieces to create my Christmas tree shape before I permanently glued it to the wood frame. I simply laid out my various shapes on a large piece of cardboard until I got the design that I wanted. To transfer the pieces from my cardboard to the frame, I placed them right next to each other. I started at the top with the star. I continued to transfer the pieces of mirror from my poster board to my wood board until each piece was in the perfect spot to shape my Christmas tree. To the back of my mirrored pieces, I'm adding E6000. Now, I actually ended up using 2 full bottles of this E6000 because I really wanted those pieces to be stuck well to my board. The last thing you want are some mirrored pieces coming down on you after you have it hung up on your wall. So I wanted to make sure that they were stuck on there really well. So I added a liberal amount to the back of each of the mirrored pieces, and I slowly and methodically worked my way down the tree until each piece had been glued in place, and then I let the glue dry for 24 hours. To the back of my frame, I'm adding some frame hooks that I got from an old picture frame that I wasn't using anymore. So again, this isn't going to cost me any additional money. Once those hooks were on, I hung up my picture on the wall right above the Bombay chest in my office. That way I can enjoy it all season long. To add some more seasonal detail to my display, I decided to add some of these beautiful snowflakes. I hung them from the ceiling. What I did was I got some fishing line and I tied it to the snowflake, and then I got a thumbtack and I wrapped the fishing line around the thumbtack, and then I poked it into the ceiling at various heights. The flurry of snowflakes adds such a wintry feeling to my display. So let's quickly go over the costs of our project. And like always, I'm gonna round because it's just easier to do math that way. So the wood was $6.50. The mirror was $6.50. The stain was $5, and the 2 tubes of E6000 was $6. I had everything else. So if you add all that together, it's $24. That is a savings of $401 over our inspiration piece. I am so thrilled with the way that this turned out. I'm actually disappointed that I didn't do this project earlier, but now I have a beautiful piece of seasonal decor that I can keep and display for years to come. I love switching out wall art for different seasons and holidays, so we are going to create some beautiful art in a shadow box. The first thing that I need is a backdrop for our art. Cricut has these huge pieces of scrapbook paper. I selected a cream one, and I'm going to cut it to the size that will fit inside of my shadow box. I got a self-healing mat and a rotary cutter, and I simply cut the scrapbook to size. Next, we need to put in a fall design. So I headed back to my Cricut design space. I clicked on New Project. I went to Images. I typed in pumpkin again. There are a huge variety of pumpkins that you can choose from. I scrolled down, I checked them all out, and then selected this one. And then I hit Add to Canvas. The size was already perfect, so I didn't even have to mess with the size. I went over and I hit Make It. I selected without a mat because I'm using a smart vinyl, and hit Continue. Then I hit Continue again. At this point, you select your material. I'm doing a smart vinyl permanent. I hit more on the pressure. I hit the flashing arrow button, which loaded my smart gold vinyl into the machine. Once it was done measuring, I hit the start button, which began cutting. Once the Cricut Maker was finished cutting, I hit the flashing arrow button, which released my material. Now it's time to cut the second half of the pumpkin. I selected it, and then I chose my material, and then on the pressure, I hit more. To load my material into my maker, I hit the flashing arrow button, and then I hit the flashing start button to begin the cutting process. Once everything was 100% done cutting, I hit that flashing arrow button, which released my material. I weeded away the excess vinyl from both of my pumpkin design pieces. Once they were finished, I got my transfer tape and I put it over the top. I pressed the transfer tape firmly to the vinyl with my scraper tool and then removed the backing. I took my decal and I put it in the center of my scrapbook paper. I used my scraper tool and pressed it firmly onto the scrapbook paper, and then I removed the transfer tape. Then I took my second vinyl decal and put that in place. I did the same thing. I pressed it firmly to the scrapbook paper and then removed the transfer tape. Now that my pumpkin is in place, we are going to embellish it similarly to the way that we did our pillow covering. A couple weeks ago, I did a Horchow dupe where I used these white dried flowers. I had a couple left over, so we are going to use those. I also purchased some pumpkin picks at the Dollar Tree. The Dollar Tree also had some wood leaves. I got a package of those. And then I also have leftover ribbon and leftover leaves from the flower packages that we used on our pillow. I got some hot glue and I began to hot glue all of my elements in place. I put hot glue on the back and then pressed them to the scrapbook paper. Next was the dried rose. I added some hot glue to the back of that and then put it in the center of the leaves. Then I took my wooden leaves, added hot glue to the back of those and pressed them to the scrapbook paper. Then I took the leaf ribbon and added it to the stem. Then I hot glued some smaller dried flowers to the center and finally added more of those Dollar Tree wood leaves to the stem. We only need the pumpkins from our Dollar Tree picks, so all I needed to do was just pull those pumpkins right off the pick. And then at the bottom, I added more leaves and leaf ribbons. I put hot glue on the bottom of the pumpkins and placed them on either side of the dried rose. And finally, I filled in the gaps with more leaves and fall botanicals. Now everything is in place. I think it looks so pretty. I put it right back into the shadow box frame. I just placed it in there, put the backing on the back, and then folded the clamps back in place. You could leave it just like this. It is perfect for a fall centerpiece. However, we're gonna take it one step further and add a corner swag to the top. I put a command hook on the top of the frame. I took a stem of these white leaves that I purchased at Michael's and I shaped it to look like an L. I wrapped some floral wire around it to keep it in this shape. Then I took some of that same ribbon that we used on our silverware caddy and I tied it into a bow. I cut a segment of the leaf ribbon. I added some hot glue to the bow and then put the leaf ribbon in the hot glue. In the center of the bow, I hot glued a large dried rose in place. I tucked in 2 mini Dollar Tree pumpkins into the wire and then hot glued my ribbon to the center. And then all I did was took the wire that I had wrapped around the center of my stem of leaves and I slid it through the command hook that was on the top. This will hold my corner swag in place. This added detail finishes off this shadow box frame beautifully. It ties in all of the colors that we are using throughout our home. I'm going to place this shadow box on top of my fireplace mantle in my bedroom. The blue pumpkins coordinate so well with the blue and white ginger jars and the other pumpkins and leaves I have adorning my fireplace mantle. The shape of this mirror is so on trend right now. I have seen them all over Pinterest, all over the internet. However, if you want to buy one, you're going to have to pay for it because they can get really expensive. So I was thinking, how could I find one that's affordable? And I thought, you know what, I'm gonna hit up my local thrift store, and so that's what I did. They had a huge variety of mirrors there. I rummaged through and I came across this gorgeous mirror, and it only cost $15. Yes. Now, the brown color, it definitely needed to be changed, and I knew that, but the shape was perfect. The transformation started with a good washing. I scrubbed it and got all the dust and debris off of it, and then I dried it completely. I got out some butcher paper. I'm going to cover up the mirror with this butcher paper. Now there's a teeny little spot in between where the frame is and where the mirror is, and I could tuck that butcher paper right in between that space. It's a much better option to use the butcher paper because I know it's underneath every single part of that frame, as opposed to, say, blue painter's tape, because I don't know about you, but sometimes I put that stuff on and it's uneven, and then I'll actually get like a line. So the butcher paper worked wonders. I did use the blue painter's tape to adhere all of the pieces of butcher paper together. Once everything was thoroughly covered and protected, it's time to paint it. I'm using this Rustoleum Gold metallic spray paint. I love this spray paint. It is a perfect shade of gold. I use it all the time, and you can buy it at Walmart or at Lowe's or Home Depot. I began to spray the paint on the frame. I did a light coat around all the sides of the mirror. I let the first coat dry for about 30 minutes. And then I did the second coat. I repeated this process. And one way to make sure that you get a good even finish is to stand about 1 to 2 feet away from the piece and to move the paint constantly, to move that spray paint, to move it around constantly so it evenly adheres to the frame. Once it was completely saturated in the paint, I let it dry for an hour. Then I simply removed the butcher paper and the painter's tape, and it revealed a brand new, refreshed mirror. I hung it above my mantle right here, and I love the way that it reflects so much light back into the room. Working with mirrors, especially in darker rooms or smaller confined spaces, is a great design element to add because, again, it reflects, it makes it feel larger, and it also is a timeless, elegant piece that doesn't go out of style. And for $15 plus a can of spray paint, I was able to transform this mirror into something remarkable. This shadow box has seen a better day. It's pretty beat up. It's got some wood splinters and some dings all over the frame. It's a little weathered. And yes, we do love to live and laugh, but we are going to remove those rocks from the shadow box and put something even better inside. And the price was only $2.99, which is fantastic. I got a sanding sponge and I began to sand down all of the splinters that were along the frame to make it smooth. And then I cleaned the frame with a damp, clean cloth. Because it is a shadow box, there is about a 1/2 inch piece of wood along the inside of the frame, so I'm not able to take out the glass. So what I am going to do is get a piece of copy paper and some blue painter's tape. I put the paper down in the center, and then I put the blue painter's tape along the edges of the frame, which will protect the glass and hold the paper in place. Then I took my frame outside and I sprayed it in some white gloss Rustoleum spray paint. I got along all the edges of the frame and on the inside corner. Then I let it dry for 30 minutes. I sprayed on a second coat. Again, I made sure that the frame was completely saturated in the white spray paint, and then I let it dry, which took 1 hour. I have a really fun event coming up this weekend. I'm hosting a baby shower. So we are going to theme the contents that we're putting into our shadow box into fall with a little bit of a baby boy spin on it. So I created this welcome little pumpkin printable. Now, if you want it, you can have it. If you're gonna have a baby shower, this would be so cute to print off and have. So I will leave a link to this free printable in my description box so you can print it off at home and have it for yourself. But what I did was I printed it off, and then I just trimmed up the size to get it the correct size so I could put it inside of my shadow box. Next, we are going to be making some mini paper pumpkins to go inside of our shadow box. I got some blue polka dot paper and I cut some pieces that were 3 inches by 2 inches. And then I got some green striped paper. Again, I cut some rectangular pieces that were 3 inches by 2 inches. You are going to need 3 of these pieces per pumpkin. I took these rectangular cardstock pieces and I folded them back and forth and back and forth and back and forth to create an accordion. Then I folded each accordion piece in half to create a fan. I got some hot glue and I hot glued the inside edges together. Then I took my 3 folded fans and I put them together to form a circle. I got hot glue and I hot glued the edges of each of the fans and I put them together to form a circle. I wanted to create another circle that went in the center of our circles. So all I had to do was half the size of the rectangles. So these smaller rectangles are a 1.5 inch by 1 inch rectangle. I repeated the same process. I folded those 3 pieces of cardstock to look like accordions. Then I folded them in half, hot glued the inside edges together, and then took my 3 fans and hot glued them together to create a circle. Now we have formed all of our circles. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna put some hot glue on the back of my mini circles and place them right in the center of the larger circles. To hide the little circle in the center, I got some buttons. This little jar of buttons is from the Dollar Tree. I just pulled out some little ones that coordinated with the color scheme I was going for. I added some hot glue to the back of these buttons, and then I just put them right in the center of our circles. Now we're gonna make some stems and some leaves to go at the top of our pumpkin. We're gonna start off with the leaves. I took some green cardstock and I folded it 3 times. Then I cut a leaf shape out of the cardstock. Because I folded it, it will create 3 identical leaves. For our pumpkin stems, I'm just using some sticks that I got outside. I added some hot glue to the bottom of the stick and I placed it right in one of the folds of the accordion. Then I got my leaf and I added some hot glue to the bottom of the leaf and I placed that at the top of my pumpkin. I then repeated the same process with the remaining 2 pumpkins. I arranged these pumpkins at the bottom of my Welcome Little Pumpkin printable. Then I got some hot glue and I hot glued the back of the pumpkins and pressed them onto the bottom of the pumpkin printable. Now it's time to put everything back into our shadow box. But first we have to say goodbye to the Live and Laugh rocks. So I pulled those off and now I have just a plain mat. So I scooted my little printable over the top of this mat. Then I got some double-sided tape which secured the mat and the paper together. Next, I took my shadow box frame and I placed it over the top of the printable. I flipped it around and secured everything back together. What a great transformation. This shadow box, it was pretty sad when we first found it, but I think that we have flipped it into something completely different and I absolutely love the contents that we put inside. I love that this is themed fall, but it's also themed for a baby shower. This is something that you could do at home. Instead of saying welcome little pumpkin, you could say welcome fall, happy fall, harvest, whatever, but you could still create some mini pumpkins and put it inside of a shadow box, which would definitely theme them into this autumn season. I see wall hangings like this all of the time at my local thrift store. All it is a giant piece of wood with a picture on it. So we're gonna turn it into a blank canvas so I can hang these 3 pieces of coral art. The first thing I did was I took this board outside and I got some gold Rustoleum spray paint. I painted a thorough coat. I covered up that flower really well in the paint. I sprayed along the edges and I made sure that the top surface was completely covered in the paint, and then I let it dry for 30 minutes. I repeated the process with the second coat of paint. I fully saturated the sides and the top of this wall art one more time to make sure that it was 100% gold, and then I let it dry overnight. If you can't find a piece of wall art like this, just go to Lowe's or Home Depot and buy an inexpensive piece of board there and paint it. It'll be just as affordable, and it will be a great neutral backdrop for you to add whatever piece of art that you would like to the top. So I'm going to add some coral art, and I got these frames which are going to be perfect in my display. The white and the gold, I got these at the Dollar Tree. To the glass, I'm going to add some coral. On my Cricut design space, I hit New Project, I clicked Image, and in the search bar, I typed in coral. Several options came up. I scrolled down to this because it had 3 distinct coral shapes. I selected it and clicked Insert Image. Brought it to my design space. I hit Ungroup so I could separate them. I didn't need this outline, so I selected and deleted it. Then I selected the red coral. I went to the size, and I knew the width that I wanted was 6 inches. So I typed 6 on the width, and it auto-filled the height. I selected my second coral, typed 6 on the width, and it auto-filled the height. And then finally I selected my third coral. I typed in 6 on the width, and it auto-filled the height. At this point, I went over to Make It. It sorted it onto my mats. There are 3 mats. I clicked Continue, which brought me to my materials selection. I selected vinyl, and then I did more on the pressure. To ensure my vinyl stays firmly to the mat, I'm adding a little bit of blue painter's tape to the corners. I loaded the vinyl into the mat by hitting the flashing arrow button, and then started the cutting by hitting the flashing C button. It loaded this into my mat and began the cutting process. Once it was finished, I hit the flashing arrow button, which released my mat, and now I have my coral. On my design space, I selected the second mat, and it began cutting that. Once it was finished, I selected the third mat, and it cut that coral as well. Once I was finished with the 3 corals, I hit Finish on my computer. I removed the excess vinyl away from the coral with my weeding tool. I just pulled it away and it came right up. Then I had my coral. I took my transfer tape next, peeled it away from the backing, placed it in the center of my vinyl coral, and then got my scraper tool and pressed the transfer tape firmly to the vinyl, and then removed the backing from the vinyl. I took the glass out of the frame, then I put my vinyl coral in the center. I got my scraper tool and I pressed it firmly to the glass, and then I removed the transfer tape. Are you guys ready for those free printables? Well, it's time. The backdrop that I have on these frames, I created. I wanted a white and gold and navy, kind of different colored blues that reminded me of waves, so I just made it myself. If you would like to use these printables as a backdrop in your art, I will leave a link in my description box so you can print them off and have them at home. I'm going to place the glass back into the frame. Then I'm going to get my first printable, lay it behind the glass, and then replace the backing. Once my first piece of coral art was finished, I moved on to the second. I added the vinyl coral to the glass. I put my second printable behind the glass and placed everything back into the frame. And then I repeated the process with the third coral. I added it to the glass, put the printable behind, and then placed the backing on the frame. And now I have 3 very inexpensive pieces of coral art. You could stop here if you wanted to. You could hang these up on a wall and they'd be fantastic, but I wanted to create one singular piece of art. So we're gonna pull back in this wall art that we spray painted gold. I'm going to get a screw and I'm going to put it in the center of the wall art. I got my yardstick and a ruler. I measured the middle and then I screwed it in with my screwdriver. On the back of the frame, there's a little hook and I just hooked that right onto the screw. Then I measured my second placement for my second screw, screwed that in, added the middle piece of coral art, and finally I moved on to the bottom piece. I measured it once again, added that screw, and then put that frame right on the screw. Now I have one singular piece of art. How gorgeous is this? Again, if you are at some kind of department store, this would be so expensive. And all we did was took an outdated piece of wall art and transformed it. And the transformation is so dramatic. Simply by recycling a thrifted piece of wall decor and adding on 3 Dollar Tree frames with coral vinyl inside, we got an expensive look for a very affordable price.